Zing, zing.
Woo! You ready? Let's do it.
Zing, zing, zing.
Woo! Yes, your kids will love that. Steal it. Especially the little girls. They're like, can I have 5 rainbows? Okay, so introduction. Here's your introduction. So your Unit 1 introduction, the first part of the introduction is an introduction to the entire skills, the skills string, right? And then if you go a little further, you'll have just your Unit 1 introduction. Every teacher guide that you will use this year has an introduction, right? So I'm going to let you guys kind of briefly skim over that introduction and highlight some things that you will use and why this would be necessary to read before, right? So I would love to hear conversations going at your tables and sharing out. You can make some notes of key features, and then we'll come back together in about a minute or two. We're not so much looking at content as much as headings and like kind of the gist of each section. Grab some highlighters. Okay. And you know, if we want to just bullet on our sticky notes some headings, right, that we see, not so much content and reading in depth. This introduction will have some time to do that later. But if you just want to look at the different headings and how those would be important for you to read after. You're going to get some sound cards. And I'll show those to you in a little bit. Are you used to having like... Right. 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 What program did you use? Okay. So yeah, those not really work. And I will explain why when we dive into like the principles of the program. But you will have something that's familiar. I think I'll be able to clarify that more for you guys once we get into the phonological awareness lessons and the law behind that. When I get to that, will you like, hey, will you shout out? Okay, so yes. TK. Are you TK is in like pre-K? Is that what you guys call it? What's TK? What's transition? Oh, okay. Okay. Duh! Long moment of the day. All right. So you're asking if the components are the same. So you'll be using those with your transition class. This will work. Okay. So when I start telling you and explaining the philosophy and the reason behind it, you are really going to have a perfect opportunity this year to very closely guide. Like, you'll see what I'm saying in a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead. You want to keep you guys engaged, right? You want to know. Or it's TK. It's all one. There's not a separate TK program. Okay, that's what you're asking. So you will be using this with your TK class, and I'll show you what we're going to do and where to access some remediation steps. It's going to be wonderful. Okay, so what you guys see with like the different headings in the introduction? If you want to share out, I would love that. It has objectives. Why is that important for you to know as a teacher? What are we doing for the next 10, 20 days, right? We need to know what our students should be able to do at the end of this unit, right? What else? What are some other helpful things?
The components of the program.
The components of the program. Perfect. What else? Definitely need to know the components, so we're utilizing them all.
Pretest.
There's pretest. Wow, there's the beginning of the year assessment built in for you guys, right? Like in your core 60 minutes. What else? What beginning of the year assessment have you used in the past? Do you currently use in addition to this? Do you have kindergarten checklist?
Yeah, please.
Perfect. Okay.
And then it has a section where is this unit necessary for all students? You kind of see, do you need it for all students or just for a select few?
So that's a really good point, and I'm so thankful you brought that up. Thank you. So Unit 1 is actually going to focus on, the main focus is are on like print concept directionality, writing strokes, right? Using like a tripod grip, and hearing environmental sounds, right? And so that seems pretty basic, right? But let's talk about the kindergartners who enter your class. Sometimes it's assumed that they have all those skills. In reality, do they always have those skills? No. No, not at all, right? So here you see where we're going to start. This is just a little glimpse of where we're already going to tackle closing that assumes that gap, right, that they come in with, and we're going to have time to do that. So in Unit 1, when you use that fancy little pre-assessment, well, it's actually just a writing assessment, but this is a 10-day unit, so it's real quick. But you will see how to use that. Unit 1, I would suggest, no matter where, and it even says that, like, if all of your students score this score on this assessment, then they would be ready for Unit 2. However, if all of your students score that, please email me, because I want to be like, wow, they are really ready for kindergarten, right? Which typically isn't always the case. So, I would say everybody should be doing Unit 1 to make sure we're strengthening for those kids who are ready for kindergarten, strengthening those writing skills, hearing those environmental sounds, and really laying that solid foundation for understanding print concepts. But we definitely need to be doing Unit 1, right? So we're getting everybody, we're leveling the playing field in Unit 1, the first 10 days of school, and especially continuing to do that in Unit 2. So what else is in the introduction? What about your materials? Is that in your introduction? That's important, right? Making sure I have those items or something similar to that in my classroom to use during those lessons. Anything else you see that could help you? All right. We have some take-home activities. Awesome. So, would we say that we have to read this to know where we're going within each unit? Absolutely. I would say that as our first to-do. It's before day 1, if you want to read your introduction on our to-do list. Before day 1, we really need to read our introduction. And with each unit, we also need to read that introduction every time, right? So let's move on. Let's just look at a lesson. I want to let you guys know that in kindergarten, this first unit may not look exactly the same, but I'm just going to be highlighting features, okay? So if you look at your day 1, your first lesson, if anybody wants to shout out the page it's on. Page 9, perfect, page 9. Let's look at page 9. And if we look at page 9, this is how your lesson's going to start. And so you see that at the top of your lesson, there's going to be a title, obviously. And you will also see on the front of, at the beginning of every lesson, a primary focus of the lesson, your primary focus objectives that are aligned to your standards. And then you'll see a formative assessment piece, right? This formative assessment piece is going to tell you if your kids have mastered those primary focus objectives. So our primary focus of the lesson is what our kids should be able to do by the end of the lesson. And our formative assessment is, this is how we're going to know if they're able to do it, right? All aligned to one another and to those standards. So how can this help you as a teacher? Do you guys have to post objectives? Yes. Ta-da! They're all right there, right? Do you have to like turn them into I can statements or anything like that? Yes. Ta-da! And is this formative assessment built in for you to guide your instruction further? Yes. So wonderful, it's all there, right? It breaks it down by this anchor standard. So this is a fabulous piece for you. If you are laser focused on your objective, or you're is very helpful for me as a classroom teacher, because for my kids who don't have strong language or oral language, and my EL learners, like this piece tells me to have pictures, like to pull up pictures, so I might pull up pictures on my iPad of vocabulary, this tier 1 vocabulary that my kids really still need, right? I need to show them this. And so this is very helpful to me to have pulled up some type of pictures or in preparing to make sure I'm meeting their needs and supporting them throughout that lesson. So can you see how this is supporting you as a teacher? Yes, I think it's a beautiful piece, in my opinion. Do you see it? Do you think it'll be helpful for you?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on. So the next piece we're going to look at is the actual where the lesson begins. All right, and when we look at this lesson, you will see that it's broken down into different pieces, and we have our timing, right? That timing icon. And we also have our primary focus objectives again, right? What our kids should be able to do by the end of this activity. In the columns, right here, you will have a list of your materials. Has anyone ever seen the first edition of CKLA? Okay, the first edition was not as user-friendly. This is so helpful in the columns. And I'll also show you what else is in the columns. So this is not a scripted program. This is your instructional roadmap for how your activity should flow, right? So one thing that as an administrator I would expect to see, right, is some type of annotation in there, right, because it's not scripted, highlighting, making sure that you're prepared for your lesson and following it with fidelity, but you're not, reading word for word, or because if you try and do that in class, it's not going to flow well. There have been times where I have not, life happens and you aren't always prepared, and so you walk in and go, cognitive overload those days. So we need to make sure we're prepared for this. I'm also going to show you how to access this online in a little bit. So you do forget your teacher guides, and your fourth graders punished from their phone, and they just need some readings they want to play on a device. Like, here, baby, go ahead and read my lesson to me while I'm driving you to soccer. So that's all things to think about. So here we have our materials again. Every lesson is going to have a couple of check for understandings. You'll see this clipboard with this check. And so that check for understanding is aligned to your primary focus objective. And what is that going to do for you in that moment? As a teacher, when you ask a question,
Do they get it?
it's a quick little assessment that you're going to provide immediate feedback, change your instruction immediately, right? So with those check for understandings, in the sidebars, you'll also have either a support note, right? I'll show you the next support, or a challenge note, right? So know that these sidebars are going to be where your supports are for your kids, like to provide in-the-moment feedback, okay? And then we have our formative assessment right here. So think speedometer. I think it looks like a speedometer. Do you guys think it looks like a speedometer? The little icon, right? Assessing Miss Horse if she's speeding, right? So this formative assessment is going to be aligned to that primary focus objective, and it's often given daily in some way, shape, or form to further guide your instruction. When it says take-home materials, this is going to be in a student activity book. Guys, you can say goodbye to the copy machine for ELA for a little bit. Do you guys love the copy machine? How many of you love the copy machine? Yes. You love it?
Yes.
I'm like, everyone's like, no, right? We need to read that manual. Although I don't think it would help if they have mine of their own. So this will be in your student activity book as well. So will a lot of their formative assessments and check for understanding is really in the moment for you. Okay, so let's move on. Is this program scripted? No. So you will read through your bullets and annotate on what you want to do, right? Okay, so that was the foundational skills part, right? To build phonological awareness. Then it's going to move into a reading part of your lesson, and we'll dive in more into content later. But I wanted you guys to see this support. Here we have that time again, and the materials in the sidebar. But this is very helpful for me. Every time you see this hands icon in your sidebar, make note of that every time you see that hand, that is really for you. Will your kids know that you are providing in the moment feedback? No, this is just to provide support very quickly. Any questions so far? Are we liking the layout? Are we not liking the layout?
Like
Good? Okay. Awesome. And like I said, those supports are also aligned with the objectives for the lesson. Okay. I am going to show you guys where pausing points are, what they're used for. But before we do that, at where your lesson stops is typically at that formative assessment piece, right? And then you'll see a part of your lesson that says additional resources. Do you see that after that, like end of that lesson, additional support? Okay, I'm going to jump here first because instead of having you guys like flip back and forth towards the end of the book. So this additional support is not part of your 60 minutes, okay? That is for you to provide to provide further instruction, remediation for your kids going forward, okay? Do you see these additional support activities, how they have like TR point something? Do you see that? At the end of your teacher guide, in the teacher resources, you will have answers to all of the activity pages, but these activities are already made for you there. So those teacher resources, all you would have to do for those games to provide remediation is really just make copies. And it goes with that lesson, right? So, let me show you, this would be very helpful. These activities are at the end. You just would have to like make copies. It's already pre-made. This hands down is probably one of my favorite pieces of the second edition. This is new to second edition with having those resources embedded within those lessons. Because every day, my intervention group during RTI, what do you guys call your intervention time? Academy. really strong with writing skills, right? And you might want to look further ahead and give them a little something more to provide that enrichment piece. And that's just off the top of my